Hi, my name is Dave Schultz, and I'm a solutions consultant here at Tipalti. I'm going to spend about the next 15 minutes or so walking you through the end-to-end global AP process for invoice back spend so you can get a good understanding of how the Tipalti system functions. Before I get into the demo itself, I just want to spend a quick 30 seconds just walking you through how I'm going to walk through the presentation, the areas I'm going to touch upon. And you look upon this wheel right here, you'll notice that as we start from 12 o'clock and move our way clockwise around, in the top right-hand corner, we'll first hit on supplier onboarding and how we capture good, clean information about who you're looking to pay. And I won't touch on the bullet points right now. You'll see that as part of the demo. As we continue to move around, we'll hit through tax compliance and then onto invoice processing, how we capture invoices, how we can then turn them through advanced approval routing in order to make them payable, the payment process within Tipalti, the 190 countries, 120 currencies, and then all the way back and through the end, which is reconciliation and reporting in the top left-hand side of this wheel. Throughout that, I'll highlight briefly our multi-entity capabilities and talk to the integrations that we have and how this can connect seamlessly into your ERP system. So with that, I'm going to the Tipalti platform. Oops. I'm going to log in very quickly. And when I log in, what you're going to see is this is what we call the Global AP Hub. And the Global AP Hub is where the AP system and the AP team are going to live. Now, across the top, you'll notice several different tabs, and we'll touch on all of these throughout the demonstration. But I'm going to start on adding a brand new payee. Now, mind you, this is a new vendor, a new payee you're adding into the system, not necessarily those that already exist within your ERP system. As part of our implementation, we can help migrate a lot of that information over to allow for a more seamless setup. When you're adding a brand new vendor into the platform, there's just a couple of pieces of information that we need. Essentially, a unique ID, could be what you have in your ERP system or one we can create for you, an email address and who they are. It's also where you'll see the first components of our multi-entity capabilities. So if you have multiple subsidiaries, global entities, you can ensure that when information is tied back into your ERP system that it sets to the right set of books. And here you'll notice I'm just tying a vendor to a preferred entity. With a click of a button, I can go ahead and add this vendor and generate a white labeled email communication that will be sent out to them. Here's an example of one. OnSpot Services is my fictitious company. Think about your logo here. Also think about your email address is where we'd like to embed into. And the reason we like to do that is to ensure that when your vendor receives a notification, it's coming from someone they're expecting. Otherwise, they may think this is a phishing email. We also allow for configurable text here so you can provide more information on why the vendor is receiving this notification. The vendor will then go ahead and click on this link, and that's going to take them to the onboarding process within our white labeled portal. I've kind of skipped the part in which we create the user account, but the very first time the vendor goes through this, they'll have to create a username and password. Once they've done that, there's a 3-step process in which they work, capturing who they are and where they are, how they want to get paid, and then any tax documentation you'd like to collect. The very first part is who they are, and why we need to capture that is for twofold. One, we do OFAC and sanction screening on everyone we pay through the system. It's part of our obligations as a money service business and a licensed money transmitter. We also, based upon where they're located, will help drive what's available when it's time to select a payment method. Now, out of the box, Tipalti offers 6 different payment methods. Direct deposit or ACH, wire, check, PayPal, local bank transfer if you're thinking about international transactions, as well as prepaid debit cards. In my demo environment, however, you'll notice that I only have 4 configured. So the point is that you get to control what payment method you want to offer to your payees. Now, because I'm a U.S. vendor, a direct deposit is available to me. Now, when you're collecting this information as part of the self-service process, it's good to capture data, but you want to make sure the data you capture is valid and it's good. Here's an example of one of our 26,000 different business rules we have in the platform. It's essentially saying the routing code I entered isn't accurate. If you notice I change 1 digit, this is a true and valid routing code. And it's this type of rules that we have in place to ensure that when it's time to make payments, you have good data from your vendors. You're not seeing payment errors when you start a process because this information hasn't been validated. We'll do the same thing for wire transfers. So you'll see different fields need to be captured. And if you start paying into different geographies, we'll know the fields that need to be captured. For example, if you pay into India, an IFSC code might be required, or if you're paying into the UK, an IBAN. The beauty is, as you move to new markets, you don't need to know what fields you need to capture. Tipalti understands what needs to be captured to pay into these markets, and we will ensure that the vendor is populating the right information. I'm going to choose check just to not go through the 26,000 different rules and move on to the next step, which is how we capture tax documentation. I'm a U.S. entity paying out, so because of that, I would need to capture U.S. tax forms. Tipalti has worked with KPMG for several years to have this prescribed way of capturing a digitized copy and version of your traditional tax documents like a W-9. And it's all self-service, and it's all done as part of the onboarding process. So you're capturing this tax information at the appropriate time before you pay them. If they know they need to fill out a W-9, which most U.S. vendors will know, it's taking that W-9 and bringing it online and digitizing it. You're capturing it securely, so it's not being emailed into a centralized inbox where a lot of people might have access to. It's being done in an online secure system. We're also doing TIN validation. So we're going to take the tax ID as well as the name on this tax form, and we'll bounce that against the IRS database to ensure it matches. If it doesn't match, we will send a proactive white-labeled email communication to the vendor to let them know that there's something wrong and they need to log back in and fix it. Now, if you're dealing with a vendors and you're paying out of the U.S., but for folks that are international, they may not know what tax form they need to fill out. So once again, working with KPMG, we created this 5-step questionnaire. And by going through the different questions, it's going to drive us to a recommended tax form. In this case, the W-8 BEN-E. When I hit next, just like the W-9, you're going to see a digitized version here. It's going to help guide that international vendor to the appropriate, and to populate the appropriate information that's required based upon the information that they provide us. So there's dynamic nature to these forms as well. Just to also point out, we do also support multiple languages. So if you're dealing with folks internationally and French is their natural language, they have the ability to have this page translated into French to better assist them in filling out the information. Now, if you're a multiple entity organization and you have a headquarters, let's say one of them is in the UK, you obviously don't need to capture US tax forms. This flow will be changed, so when it gets to this tax form section, instead of filling out a US form, we'd be able to capture a VAT ID. And we can do this local tax ID collection in about 50 to 60 different markets. So just know for your international entities that are paying out, they're not going to be required to capture tax forms. You also always have the ability to not capture tax information at all for a vendor if you already have that on file, for example. This portal itself, though, is not just for onboarding. At any point in time, that vendor can come back and change their banking details. I've moved banks, I want to enter that new information. You as an AP team don't have to be in the business of managing that. They can do that themselves. You just have to worry about making sure that you process the payments and approve the invoices on time. The portal also serves as a way for that vendor to see transactional information. So the payments that have been processed to them, when they've been processed, and what status they're in. Same thing with invoices. With the whole goal of alleviating the types of calls or emails that might be coming into your team on where's my payment. When you also process a payment, a remittance email will be sent to the vendor to let them know what they're being paid for, including invoice details. So they'll know a payment's coming to them and it's for these items and this is the amount. The last part of the last part of the vendor experience that I want to chat about real quick is how invoices are submitted. If they're in the portal, they can easily just log in or they can just upload an invoice right here. It's like attaching a document to an email. This will get automatically uploaded into the Tipalti platform. But more often than not, and this might be your current experience today, you have an inbox in which invoices are sent. We can reroute those invoices directly into Tipalti. So some of our customers leverage the existing inbox. Some we spin up a white labeled version for them so that those are the invoices and that's the email in which invoices are going to be routed to Tipalti. And the reason that customers will do that is their traditional AP inbox may be used for other types of documentation and usages than just invoice processing. Either way, we can handle the scenario. So now I'm going to kind of pause and switch hats and move away from what the vendor experiences and what you as an AP team would experience. I'm going to pick it up from when an invoice comes into the system. Whether it's via the upload or via an email, Tipalti is going to have a digitized version of that invoice right here in the UI, and we're going to go through OCR, or optical character recognition, to try to pull the data that's on this image into the template you see here. Things like who the vendor is or the payee, the invoice number, invoice date, even items such as, even line item details, as you'll see here, all pulled into the user interface. Now, invoices are not always the same per company, and there are different fields that might need to be captured. And OCR in and of itself is about 70 to 75% accurate industry-wide. So on top of OCR, we also have a managed service team that will help fill in the blanks. For example, let's say the invoice number didn't populate properly. Our managed service team will take a first crack at reviewing this and fixing any of those items, so that when it comes down to invoice processing, you and your team are more about reviewing the data versus having to do data entry and key things in. Then if you look here, you'll notice that there's a chart of accounts that we can sync from your ERP, as well as what we call custom fields. We know that you may allocate your costs by department. The company next to you might allocate by location and project ID, or you may allocate across all three. Tipalti has the flexibility to capture each one of those different fields, or one of them or all three of them, so that when it's time to sync back into your ERP, that we can ensure that the coding and allocation happens appropriately. We have line item level custom fields like you see here at department. We also have header level custom fields like you might see here at location. From a multi-entity perspective, even though your vendor might traditionally work with one entity, if they work across multiple, you can easily assign this invoice to a different entity so that it posts properly back into your ERP. The last item I'm going to mention here is simply approval process. We leverage machine learning to pre-populate a recommended approval workflow based upon historical information, things like who the vendor is, any of the custom fields like department, and the dollar amount, because individuals can be given specific dollar threshold permissions. And then you'll notice that a recommended approval sequence is here. Now, while we leverage machine learning and we pre-populate this, we also know that sometimes things are fluid and people move in and out of roles. So individuals with the right permissions can say, well, Kobe used to do this role, but 2 weeks ago he moved on, and this is the first time an invoice is coming in from this vendor. So instead of Kobe, I need to remove him, and I need Shauna to be on the approval workflow. So I set this up, and now when this goes submitted into the approval process, Shauna will be on the approval workflow instead of Kobe. The machine learning will also update and know that the next time an invoice comes in with these parameters, it will route to Shauna instead of Kobe. So we allow the rigidity of a static approval workflow based on the machine learning on how things have been improved in the past, but the flexibility to allow you to fix things quickly without having going into an administrative user interface in order to configure your approval sequence. Once everything looks good, you just hit submit, and that will trigger the approval process. Two different ways invoices can be approved. One you'd expect within a kind of an online portal like this. I can log in, single select all, and approve. I can drill down and I can view the invoice, and I can approve from here as well. I'll see a copy here. That's one way. And if you're approving 50 to 100 invoices a week, you probably want to log into a portal. But we do also offer a second way in which invoices can be approved, and that's via email. So if you're just approving a handful of invoices a week, do you want your folks learning a new system, going through the change management of learning a new platform, when they can approve directly from their email? A copy of the invoice will always be attached. They can review, and then they can approve directly from this email. They could be about to hop on an airplane at their daughter's soccer game. All the friction of having to log in somewhere else and approve goes away. It can help expedite the invoice approval process, and it keeps change management at a minimum. At some point, everyone who needs to approve will approve, and that invoice becomes what we call pending payment. This is where individuals with the appropriate permissions will be able to log in and create a payment run, whether that's selecting a couple, selecting all, and then scheduling the payments. They can also filter. So give me all invoices in a specific date range and when it's due. Give me all invoices in that date range plus the specific entity, or maybe a specific custom field like department. And you can do all of these together. That'll that'll cull this list down to only those that are relevant, so then you can create a payment run. When you create the payment run and schedule the payments, that doesn't automatically make the payments process. That just creates a payment grouping. And I'm going to show a very specific payment run here. First thing I want to point out is, it's great that you had an approval process on invoices, but right here you also see there's another financial control that's available. So a lot of companies want to have, let's say, a controller or someone else approve for the cash to leave the building and review payments before they go out the door. And they always have the ability to potentially, remove a payment from the payment run if they decide this vendor owes us money, I don't want to process that. On top of that, when you look at this payment run, right now it's 9 vendors. It could be 900. So there's the ability to scale and do everything in one payment run. On top of that, you're noticing that there's Euro, USD, and GBP all in one payment run. You'll also notice that there are multiple payment methods here, all in one payment run. You don't need to log into different portals if you need to process a wire versus a check run, make a payment versus Euro versus USD. You can do it all in one place. We do all the heavy lifting. You just have to determine who you want to pay. So in order to accomplish the payment, Tipalti has what we call virtual accounts, in which you fund for us to process those transactions. And then as a licensed money transmitter, we then submit the funds based on the payment method that the vendor is requesting through the appropriate banking rails. So when we think about the payment being processed from a reconciliation perspective, let's talk about kind of the integrated world. When an invoice is submitted for approval, or when it's approved, we can sync into ERPs, let's say like a NetSuite, to have that information real-time posted, so create that vendor bill. When a payment run is created, we can then update that bill and create the payment record within the ERP as well. So you have that kind of sync of data real-time, which will considerably reduce the amount of reconciliation. So when you think about reporting, a lot of that can be done directly within your ERP because of all the real-time posting. However, we always have at your fingertips the ability to run some reports to pull out data. And two I want to kind of focus on specifically is these 1099 and 1042S preparation reports. We're processing payments and we're capturing tax documentation, so we have all the data to help produce these reports. Now, we won't file the taxes on your behalf. We make it a lot easier by giving you the data in a consumable format for those services that you can submit tax forms through. So it's kind of the 15-minute overview of the Tipalti end-to-end AP solution. If you have any other questions, you can feel free to reach out to a sales representative at Tipalti, and we'll be happy to get in touch. Thank you very much.